The screaming stopped at 3:47 a.m. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her trembling hand against the reinforced glass, watching Subject 7 collapse in the sterile white chamber. 12 volunteers had entered the psychological isolation experiment. Only 3 remained conscious. But the real horror wasn't what the sensory deprivation was doing to their minds, it was what the hidden cameras had captured the research team doing to each other. The experiment had 2 subjects, the volunteers behind the wall and the scientists watching them. One group was supposed to break. The other was supposed to stay human. Dr. Chen, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry wasps as Dr. Sarah Chen adjusted her white coat and checked her watch. 6 a.m. sharp. The Hartwell Institute for Behavioral Psychology never slept, but mornings always felt like fresh starts until today. "You're early," Dr. Marcus Webb said, not looking up from his computer screen. His fingers moved across the keyboard with mechanical precision, entering data that would determine the fate of 12 human beings sealed behind a concrete wall. "Couldn't sleep," Sarah replied, settling into her chair at the observation deck. Through the one-way mirror, she could see the pristine white chamber where their subjects had been living for the past 72 hours. 12 beds, 12 people, 0 windows. The Sensory Deprivation Longevity Study, or SDLS, as Webb insisted on calling it, was designed to test the limits of human psychological endurance. Subject 4 is showing increased agitation, Webb noted, his voice clinical and detached. Heart rate elevated, repetitive behaviors emerging. Sarah watched the young woman, Jennifer, she reminded herself, her name is Jennifer, pace back and forth across the small space. Jennifer had volunteered for the study to pay for her mother's cancer treatment. The $50,000 stipend for completing the full 2-week isolation period was more money than she'd ever seen. "She's been awake for 36 hours, Sarah said. "That's normal stress response." "Normal is relative in our line of work," Webb replied. He was 45, distinguished, and had built his career on pushing ethical boundaries. The SDLS was his magnum opus, a study that would revolutionize understanding of sensory deprivation and collective psychological breakdown. The chamber door hissed open, and Dr. Emily Reeves entered the observation room. Her usually perfect blonde hair was disheveled, her lab coat wrinkled. She'd been monitoring the overnight shift. "We have a problem," Emily announced, her voice tight with exhaustion and something else, fear. "Define problem," Webb said, finally looking up from his screen. Subject 7 attempted self-harm at 3:30 a.m. Makeshift blade from a food tray. Security. Footage shows he was trying to cut his wrists. Sarah's stomach dropped. "We need to extract him immediately." Protocol states we intervene only if there's imminent danger of death," Webb interrupted. He was stopped by other subjects. "The situation is contained." Marcus, he tried to kill himself. He tried to cope with psychological pressure in a maladaptive way. "That's why we are here, to observe and document these responses." Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "These aren't lab rats. They are people. Human beings. Who trusted us to keep them safe." Webb's expression hardened. "Sarah, you're allowing emotional attachment to cloud your scientific judgment. This is breakthrough research. The military applications alone, military applications." Sarah's voice rose. "You never mentioned military applications in the IRB proposal. There are aspects of this study that require discretion." Webb's fingers drummed against the desk. "The Department of Defense has specific interests in understanding psychological breaking points. How long can a prisoner of war withstand isolation? What techniques accelerate psychological collapse?" Emily stepped forward, her face pale. "Marcus, that's not what we signed up for. The consent forms the subjects signed don't cover psychological torture research. The consent forms cover participation in a sensory deprivation study with potential psychological effects," Webb replied smoothly. "Everything we are doing falls within those parameters." Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. The prestigious research position, the generous funding, the state-of-the-art facility, it was all a facade. They weren't conducting legitimate psychological research. They were perfecting interrogation techniques. I'm calling the ethics review board, Sarah said, reaching for her phone. Webb's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. You're not calling anyone. You signed a non-disclosure agreement. You're bound by federal contract law. Let go of me, Sarah said, her voice deadly quiet. Sarah, please, Emily interjected. Let's all just calm down and think about this rationally. Webb released Sarah's wrist but remained standing. You two need to understand something. This research is classified. The subjects volunteered knowing there were risks. We are not breaking any laws. We are breaking every ethical standard in psychological research, Sarah shot back. These people are suffering. Subject 7 tried to kill himself. Subject 4 is showing signs of severe psychological distress. Subject 11 hasn't spoken in 18 hours. And Subject 1 is adapting remarkably well, Webb countered. David Martinez, former military, strong psychological profile. He's actually emerging as a leader in the group dynamic. This is invaluable data. Sarah looked through the mirror at David, a 32-year-old veteran who'd lost his job and needed money to support his 2 kids. He was sitting calmly on his bed, mediating a dispute between 2 other subjects. His composure was impressive, but Sarah could see the strain in his eyes. They trust us, Sarah said quietly. They believe we are going to take care of them. We are taking care of them, Webb replied. Medical monitoring, nutritional support, psychological observation. They are safer here than they would be in the outside world. They are prisoners, Emily said suddenly. Both Sarah and Webb turned to look at her. That's what this is. We've created a prison, and we are the guards. Webb's expression turned cold. Dr. Reeves, you're clearly suffering from research fatigue. Perhaps you should take a break from observation duties. I'm not going anywhere, Emily said, but her voice wavered. Sarah watched the interplay between her colleagues and felt a chill run down her spine. Something was very wrong here, and it went beyond unethical research practices. The way Webb spoke about the subjects, the casual mention of military applications, the non-disclosure agreements, this wasn't just bad science. This was something darker. I want to see the full research protocol, Sarah said. Not the summary version. The complete document. Webb's jaw tightened. That's classified above your clearance level. My clearance level? Marcus, I'm the co-principal investigator on this study. I should have access to all research materials. Your role is observation and data collection. The broader scope of the research is need to know. Sarah felt the pieces clicking together. The mysterious funding source, the high-security facility. The military-grade observation equipment. They weren't just studying sensory deprivation, they were perfecting it as a weapon. I'm done, Sarah said, moving toward the door. I'm filing a complaint with the American Psychological Association, the Institutional Review Board, and anyone else who will listen. Sarah, wait, Webb called out. You're making a mistake. This research will save lives. Understanding psychological breaking points will help us develop better resistance training for our own personnel. Sarah paused at the door. And what about the lives of the people in that chamber? What about Jennifer's life? David's life? The 11 other human beings who trusted us? They are contributing to something larger than themselves, Webb replied. Sometimes sacrifice is necessary for the greater good. Sarah looked at Emily, who stood frozen between them, her face a mask of internal struggle. Then she looked through the mirror at the subjects, 12 people who had no idea they were trapped in a psychological torture chamber masquerading as legitimate research. The greater good, Sarah repeated. Is that what you told yourself when you designed this? Webb stood slowly, his chair rolling back. Dr. Chen, you're relieved of duty. Security will escort you out. You can't fire me. I'm a co-principal investigator. Actually, you're a contracted researcher with a probationary status. And you just failed your probation. Sarah's heart pounded as she realized the trap they'd all walked into. The prestigious positions, the generous salaries, the cutting edge research, it was all designed to ensure compliance. They were as much prisoners as the subjects in the chamber. Emily, Sarah said, turning to her colleague. Come with me. We can stop this together. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I can't. Oh. I have student loans. My mother's in a nursing home. I need this job. Your mother wouldn't want you to torture people to pay for her care. We're not torturing anyone, Webb interjected. We are conducting legitimate psychological research under federal oversight. Sarah laughed bitterly. Federal oversight. Right. Which agency, Marcus? CIA. NSA. Some Black Ops division that doesn't officially exist. Webb's silence was answer enough. The door behind them opened and 2 security guards entered. They were large men in plain clothes, but their military bearing was unmistakable. Dr. Chen. One of them said politely. If you could come with us, please. Sarah looked one more time at the subjects in the chamber. David was helping Jennifer through. The room was identical to the chamber above, sterile white walls, no windows, a single bed bolted to the floor. But there were differences that made Sarah's blood run cold. Cameras mounted in every corner, red recording lights blinking steadily. A speaker system that crackled with static. And most terrifying of all, a 2-way mirror that she knew someone was watching her through. Welcome to your new research position, Dr. Chen, Webb's voice echoed from the speakers. You wanted to understand the full scope of our work. Now you'll experience it firsthand. Sarah pressed her palms against the mirror, her reflection staring back with wild eyes. Marcus, this is insane. You can't just disappear, researcher. People will ask questions. Will they? Webb's voice carried a note of amusement. According to our records, you suffered a psychological breakdown and requested immediate medical leave. Your colleagues are very concerned about your mental state. Emily knows the truth. Dr. Reeves is a pragmatic woman. She understands that cooperation ensures career advancement, while resistance leads to complications. Sarah sank onto the bed, her mind racing. Through the speaker, she could hear the ambient sounds of the facility, footsteps in distant hallways, the hum of ventilation systems, the occasional murmur of voices. She wasn't alone down here. How many others, she asked. Others? How many other researchers have you disappeared? How many other people have asked too many questions? Silence stretched for long moments. Then, the Hartwell Institute has a remarkably low turnover rate. People find their work here fulfilling. A new voice crackled through the speakers, Emily. Her tone strained and professional. Sarah, I need you to remain calm. Dr. Webb has authorized me to conduct a psychological evaluation. Emily, don't do this. You know this is wrong. I need to ask you some questions about your mental state. Have you been experiencing paranoid thoughts? Delusions about the nature of your work here? Sarah laughed bitterly. Paranoid thoughts. Emily, we are conducting illegal human experimentation. That's not paranoia, that's reality. Sarah, please. I'm trying to help you. Help me. By participating in my imprisonment. Through the mirror, Sarah could see a shadow move, Emily. Probably standing in the observation room above. The same room where they'd watched the subjects, now turned into Sarah's prison. Dr. Reeves, Webb's voice returned, please note that the subject is displaying hostile and irrational behavior. Recommend immediate psychological intervention. Don't call me a subject, Sarah snapped. I'm a colleague. I'm a human being. You're a research opportunity, Webb replied coolly. We've always wondered how a trained psychologist would respond to isolation protocols. Your expertise makes you a particularly valuable data point. Sarah felt the walls pressing in, not physically but psychologically. This was how it started, the dehumanization, the clinical language, the reduction of a person to a set of variables. She'd seen it happen to the subjects upstairs, and now it was happening to her. What about the subjects in the main chamber? Sarah asked. Are they still alive? Subject 7 made another attempt at self-harm this morning, Emily's voice was barely audible. We had to restrain him. Restrain him? Or let him suffer for your precious data. Sarah, you're not thinking clearly. The stress of the situation, the stress of watching people be tortured. Yes, Emily, that is stressful. It's called having a conscience. And you sound filtered through the speakers, screaming. High-pitched, desperate, barely human. Sarah pressed her ear to the wall, trying to identify the source. What was that? Psychological breakthrough, Webb said matter-of-factly. Subject 4 is experiencing acute sensory deprivation psychosis. Fascinating progression. That's Jennifer, Sarah whispered. She's screaming because she's having a complete mental breakdown. She's providing valuable data about the timeline of psychological collapse in civilian populations. Sarah slammed her fist against the mirror. She's a person. She has a name. She has a mother who's dying of cancer. Had, Webb corrected. Subject 4's mother died yesterday. We've chosen not to inform her, as grief could complicate the psychological profile we are developing. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Jennifer's mother was dead, and she was trapped in a white room, slowly losing her mind, unaware that the person she was suffering to save was already gone. You're monsters, Sarah breathed. We are scientists, Webb replied. Emotion is the enemy of objective research. Sarah heard footsteps in the corridor outside her room. A key turned in the lock, and the door opened to reveal a figure in medical scrubs, Dr. Harrison Pike, the facility's chief psychiatrist. She'd met him briefly during orientation, a soft-spoken man in his 50s with kind eyes. Those eyes weren't kind anymore. Dr. Chen, he said, entering with a medical kit. I'm here to conduct a psychiatric evaluation. I'm not submitting to anything, Sarah said, backing toward the far wall. I know my rights. Your rights. Pike smiled sadly. Sarah, you're having a psychotic break. You've been making wild accusations about the research staff, claiming to witness things that didn't happen. We are very concerned about your mental state. I witnessed human rights violations. I witnessed torture. You witnessed legitimate psychological research. The stress of observation duty has triggered a paranoid episode. Pike opened his medical kit, revealing syringes and medication vials. This will help you feel better. Sarah realized the trap was complete. Any resistance would be labeled as mental illness. Any accusations would be dismissed as psychotic delusions. They could do anything they wanted to her, and it would all be justified as psychiatric treatment. I won't let you drug me, Sarah said. I'm afraid that's not your choice to make, Pike replied. You're a danger to yourself and others. We have a legal obligation to provide treatment. The door opened again, and 2 orderlies entered. They were the same men who had escorted her from the observation room, but now they wore medical uniforms instead of security clothing. The transformation was complete, from researcher to patient, from colleague to subject. Dr. Emily's voice crackled through the speakers. I should note that Sarah has been displaying increasingly erratic behavior. She was found attempting to access classified files and making threats against research staff. That's not true, Sarah said, but even as she spoke, she knew it didn't matter. Truth was whatever Webb and his team decided it was. Pike approached with a syringe. This is a mild sedative. It will help you relax while we conduct our evaluation. Sarah dodged around the bed, putting distance between herself and the psychiatrist. I demand to speak to a lawyer. I demand to contact the outside world. Sarah, you're in a secure medical facility. Contact with the outside world could be harmful to your recovery. Recovery from what? I'm not sick. Paranoid delusions, aggressive behavior, inability to distinguish reality from fantasy, Pike listed clinically. Classic symptoms of acute psychotic episode. The orderlies moved to flank her, cutting off her escape routes. Sarah realized she was trapped in the same way the subjects upstairs were trapped, by walls and doors and people who had decided. She was no longer human. Emily, Sarah called out, knowing her colleague was listening. You know this is wrong. You know I'm not crazy. Sarah, please just let them help you. Emily's voice was thick with tears. It's for your own good. My own good. Or Webb's research agenda. One of the orderlies lunged forward, grabbing Sarah's arm. She twisted away, but the second man caught her from behind. Pike stepped forward with the syringe, his face professionally calm. "I'm sorry this is necessary," he said. "But you're not giving us a choice." The needle bit into Sarah's arm, and she felt the cold rush of medication entering her bloodstream. The world began to blur at the edges, but her mind remained sharp enough to understand what was happening. "You're drugging me to keep me quiet," she said, her voice starting to slur. "We are treating your psychological condition," Pike replied. "In time, you'll understand that everything we are doing is for your benefit." As the sedative took hold, Sarah heard Webb's voice through the speakers. "Excellent work, Dr. Pike. Begin the full protocol. I want to see how quickly a trained psychologist breaks under systematic psychological pressure." "Protocol parameters?" Pike asked. "Sensory deprivation, sleep disruption, medication manipulation, and gradual reality distortion. Standard package, but accelerated timeline. I want preliminary results within 72 hours. Sarah tried to protest, but her tongue felt thick and unresponsive. The orderlies lowered her onto the bed, and she felt restraints being applied to her wrists and ankles. The room spun slowly, and she realized they were going to do to her exactly what they were doing to the subjects upstairs. "Dr. Reeves," Webb's voice continued, "you'll be monitoring Dr. Chen's responses. I want detailed psychological profiles and behavioral observations every 4 hours." "Yes, sir," Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "And Dr. Reeves, your cooperation in this matter will be noted in your permanent file. Career advancement often depends on one's willingness to support important research." Sarah's vision darkened, but she could still hear the conversation continuing above her. They were discussing her like she was already gone, like she was already just another subject in their twisted experiment. "What about the subjects in the main chamber?" Emily asked. "Continue observity." David Martinez had been awake for 48 hours straight, but his mind remained sharp. While the others slept fitfully on their narrow beds, he stood guard by the chamber door, watching for any sign of change in their captor's behavior. Something was wrong, more wrong than just being locked in a white room for psychological research. "David," Jennifer whispered from across the room. She'd been crying for hours, though she couldn't explain why. "Do you think they are still watching us?" "Always," David replied quietly. "But that doesn't mean we stop being human." Through the one-way mirror, Emily Reeves watched David's calm leadership with growing admiration and horror. He had no idea that his strength was about to be systematically destroyed. "Dr. Reeves," Webb's voice crackled through her earpiece, "initiate phase 2. Begin with subject 11, the college student, Michael Chen. He's showing signs of attachment to subject 1. Emily's hands trembled as she accessed the chamber's environmental controls. Phase 2 protocols were detailed in a classified manual she'd been forced to memorize. Psychological warfare disguised as equipment malfunctions. "I can't do this," Emily whispered. "You can, and you will," Webb replied. "Unless you'd prefer to join Dr. Chen in sub-basement 3. Emily's finger hovered over the control panel. One click would flood Michael's sleeping area with subliminal audio, whispers designed to sound like other subjects talking about him, planning to exclude him, plotting against him. The psychological isolation within isolation. "Please, Emily," begged. "He's just a kid. He's 20 years old. He's a data point. Execute the protocol." Emily closed her eyes and pressed the button. Immediately, Michael began to shift in his sleep, his face contorting with distress. The whispers were so quiet they seemed imaginary, but the brain processed them anyway, planting seeds of paranoia and fear. In the main chamber, David noticed Michael's agitation. He moved closer, kneeling beside the young man's bed. "Michael, wake up. You're having a nightmare." Michael's eyes snapped open, wild and frightened. "They are talking about me," he said. His voice barely audible. "I can hear them." "Who's talking about you?" "Everyone. They think I'm weak. They think I'm going to break first." Michael sat up, scanning the room with suspicious eyes. "They're right, aren't they? I am weak. David recognized the signs of psychological manipulation. He'd seen it in military interrogations, had been trained to resist it. But knowing what was happening and being able to prove it were different things. Listen to me, David said firmly. Whatever you think you heard, it's not real. These walls, this room, it's designed to mess with your head. Don't let them win. You don't understand, Michael said, his voice rising. I can hear them right now. Jennifer's telling the others that I'm a liability. That I'm going to get everyone in trouble. Jennifer looked up from across the room, confusion and hurt in her eyes. Michael, I haven't said anything about you. I've been trying to sleep. Liar. Michael shouted, jumping to his feet. You've been whispering about me for hours. The other subjects began to stir, awakened by the commotion. David stood between Michael and Jennifer, his hands raised peacefully. Michael, you need to calm down. There's no conspiracy. We are all in this together. Are we? Michael's eyes were bright with paranoid fever. Or are you part of it too? Are you working with them? In the observation room, Emily watched the confrontation with growing horror. The psychological warfare was working exactly as designed, turning the subjects against each other, destroying the bonds that kept them sane. Excellent results, Webb's voice praised. Now initiate Protocol 2B. Target Subject 4. Emily's screen displayed Jennifer's profile and the terrible truth she'd been hiding from everyone, including herself. Jennifer's mother hadn't just died yesterday, she'd been dead for 3 days. And the facility had been intercepting all communications to and from the outside world. The mother revelation? Emily asked, her voice hollow. Full disclosure. Let Subject 4 know that her sacrifice has been meaningless. Document her psychological collapse in detail. Emily's finger found the intercom button that would connect her directly to Jennifer's audio feed. All she had to do was speak, and Jennifer's world would shatter completely. I won't do it, Emily said. Dr. Reeves, you're testing my patience. I won't destroy that girl's life for your research. You already have. Your participation in this study makes you complicit in everything that's happened. The only question now is whether you want to compound your guilt by forcing me to have someone else deliver the news. Emily looked at Jennifer, who was trying to comfort Michael despite his accusations. The young woman's face was hollow with exhaustion and stress, but she was still trying to hold the group together, still believing her mother was counting on her. If I do this, Emily said, if I tell her about her mother, will you at least consider ending the experiment early? The experiment ends when we have sufficient data. Not before. Emily pressed the intercom button. Jennifer, this is Dr. Reeves. I need to speak with you privately. Jennifer looked up at the mirror, her eyes searching for some sign of the woman who had recruited her. Dr. Reeves. What's happening? Why won't you let us out? Jennifer, I have some news about your mother. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Jennifer's face went pale and she seemed to shrink into herself. She's worse, isn't she? Jennifer whispered. The cancer spread. Emily's voice broke as she spoke. Jennifer, I'm so sorry. Your mother passed away 3 days ago. The scream that tore from Jennifer's throat was unlike anything Emily had ever heard. It was the sound of a soul being ripped apart, of hope dying in real time. Jennifer collapsed to her knees, her hands clawing at the white walls as if she could tear her way out of the nightmare. No, Jennifer sobbed. No, no, no. I was supposed to help her. I was supposed to be there. David moved to comfort her, but Jennifer pushed him away with unexpected violence. Don't touch me, she screamed. This is all meaningless. Everything we are doing here is meaningless. The other subjects backed away, frightened by Jennifer's complete breakdown. But David stood his ground, his face a mask of controlled rage. You bastards, he said, looking directly at the mirror. You told her now to break her. You've been lying to her for 3 days. In the observation room, Emily felt bile rise in her throat. Webb's voice was pleased, almost excited. Fascinating response patterns. Note how Subject 1 immediately identified the psychological manipulation. His military training is providing resistance, but the group dynamic is deteriorating rapidly. She's destroying herself, Emily said, watching Jennifer tear at her hair and clothes. We have to stop this. We are just getting started. Dr. Pike, please report to the main chamber. Subject 4 requires medical intervention. Dr. Pike's voice crackled through the intercom. Sedation protocol. Negative. I want her conscious and aware. Maximum psychological impact. Emily watched Pike enter the chamber with 2 orderlies. Jennifer was still screaming, her voice raw and broken. The other subjects huddled together, traumatized by witnessing her complete collapse. Jennifer, Pike said in his calm, clinical voice, I'm going to give you something to help with the pain. The pain. Jennifer laughed hysterically. You think there's medicine for this? You think you can drug away the fact that my mother died alone while I was playing your sick games? Pike approached with a syringe, but Jennifer scrambled away from him. Don't you dare, she snarled. Don't you dare try to make this better. I want to feel this. I want to remember what you did to me. David stepped forward, blocking Pike's path. She said no. Back off. Sir, I'm medical personnel. I need to treat her condition. Her condition is grief, David said firmly. That's not something you treat with drugs. Pike nodded to the orderlies, who moved to restrain David. But David was ready for them, his military training kicked in, and he dropped the first orderly with a precise strike to the solar plexus. The second man hesitated, giving David time to position himself between Pike and Jennifer. Nobody touches her, David said, his voice deadly calm. Nobody drugs her. She has the right to grieve. In the observation room, Webb's voice was sharp with excitement. Excellent. Subject 1 is showing protective behaviors. This is exactly what we need to document. Emily watched in horror as more security personnel entered the chamber. David was skilled, but he was outnumbered and trapped in a confined space. The confrontation was about to turn violent. David, don't, Jennifer said through her tears. It's not worth it. Nothing is worth it anymore. You're worth it, David replied, not taking his eyes off the security team. Every person in this room is worth it. The lead security officer drew a taser. Sir, stand down immediately. David smiled grimly. You want to know what's funny? I volunteered for this because I needed money to feed my kids. I thought I was doing something noble, helping science, contributing to research. But you people aren't scientists. You're predators. Last warning, the officer said. David looked at Jennifer, then at the other subjects huddled together in terror. Take care of each other, he said. Don't let them turn you into monsters. The taser fired, and David's body convulsed as electricity coursed through him. He fell to the floor, unconscious but still breathing. Excellent data, Webb's voice praised. Begin phase 3 immediately. I want to see how the group diner. 3 days without sleep. 3 days of watching Emily's face through the observation room's one-way glass as she systematically poisoned what remained of the subject's sanity. Webb had been right about one thing: hallucinogens combined with sensory deprivation created a perfect storm of psychological collapse. But he'd been wrong about Emily. Each time she pressed the buttons that released psychoactive compounds into the air supply, each time she activated the subliminal audio that whispered paranoid fantasies into sleeping minds, each time she documented another human being's descent into madness, a piece of Emily's compliance died and was replaced by cold, calculating rage. Subject 11 is showing signs of acute psychosis, Emily reported into her headset, watching Michael claw at invisible insects crawling under his skin. Severe tactile hallucinations, complete loss of reality orientation. Excellent, Webb's voice crackled with satisfaction. Continue the protocol. I want to see complete ego dissolution. Emily's hand moved to the control panel, but instead of increasing the hallucinogen concentration, she subtly adjusted the ventilation system. It was a small change, barely noticeable unless someone was looking for it. Instead of circulating the drugged air more efficiently, the system began to filter it out faster. Dr. Reeves, Webb's voice sharpened. The readings show decreased compound effectiveness. Increased concentration by 15%. Of course, Emily replied, but her fingers found different controls, ones that would gradually introduce clean air into the chamber while making it appear the drugs were still active. She'd been preparing for this moment for 72 hours. Using her computer access to study the facility systems, memorizing ventilation patterns, and most importantly, identifying Webb's blind spots. The man was brilliant at psychological manipulation, but he was arrogant about technology. He trusted his instruments more than his instincts. In the main chamber, Jennifer sat motionless in the corner, her eyes staring at nothing. The news of her mother's death had broken something fundamental inside her, but the drugs had pushed her beyond grief into a state of catatonic withdrawal. She hadn't spoken or moved voluntarily in over 24 hours. Subject 4 appears to be approaching complete psychological shutdown, Emily reported. Fascinating. Continue monitoring. If she expires, document the timeline carefully. Emily's blood turned to ice. Expires? You mean if she dies? Psychological death can precede physical death by days or weeks. It's a critical data point we've never been able to study in controlled conditions. Emily looked at Jennifer's motionless form and made her decision. No more gradual resistance. No more subtle sabotage. Webb had just crossed the line from psychological torture to potential murder. Dr. Webb, Emily said carefully, I'm detecting some irregularities in the environmental controls. I think I should run a full system diagnostic. Irregular how? Fluctuations in the chemical delivery system. If there's a malfunction, it could compromise the data. Very well. But make it quick. We are at a critical phase. Emily's fingers flew across the keyboard, but she wasn't running diagnostics. She was accessing the facility's communication systems, searching for any connection to the outside world that wasn't monitored by Webb's security protocols. Emergency systems. Every building had them, communications that bypassed normal channels. In case of fire, medical emergency, or security breach. Emily found the system buried in the building's infrastructure controls, designed to contact emergency services directly. But first, she needed evidence. Video files, audio recordings, documentation of the illegal experiments. She began copying everything to a secure drive hidden in her lab coat, knowing she would only get one chance. Dr. Reeves, how long for this diagnostic? Almost finished, Emily replied, her heart pounding as gigabytes of incriminating data transferred to her drive. A new voice crackled through her earpiece, Dr. Pike, calling from sub-basement 3. Dr. Webb, we have a situation with the soldier. Subject 1 is showing unexpected resistance to the isolation protocol. Emily's attention snapped to monitor 12, which showed David's cell 3 floors below. He was sitting calmly in the center of the room, eyes closed, breathing steadily. After 3 days of sensory deprivation that should have broken him completely, he appeared to be meditating. Explain, Webb's voice was sharp. He's using military survival techniques. Meditation, mental exercises, self-imposed discipline. His psychological profile remained stable despite maximum isolation protocols. Emily felt a surge of hope. David was holding on, maintaining his sanity through sheer force of will and training. If he could resist Webb's methods, maybe the others could too. Increase the pressure, Webb ordered. I want him broken within 24 hours. Sir, we're already at maximum recommended levels. Further escalation could cause permanent psychological damage. Permanent damage is acceptable. I need to know his breaking point. Emily watched Pike hesitate on the monitor. Even he, complicit as he was, seemed to have limits. But those limits wouldn't save David or anyone else unless someone acted. The data transfer completed. Emily had everything: video evidence of the torture, audio recordings of Webb's orders, medical files showing the subject's deteriorating conditions, and most damning of all, the classified contracts proving military funding for psychological warfare research. Dr. Reeves, diagnostic complete. Yes, sir. Systems appear normal. Emily's finger hovered over the emergency communication system. One press would send the evidence to every law enforcement agency in the state, along with GPS coordinates and a request for immediate intervention. But Webb was watching the monitors. The moment emergency responders arrived, he could destroy evidence, eliminate witnesses, or claim the whole thing was a training exercise gone wrong. Emily needed a distraction, something that would force Webb to focus elsewhere long enough for help to arrive. She looked at the chamber where the remaining subjects huddled in various states of psychological collapse. Michael was still fighting invisible insects, Jennifer was catatonic, and the others were showing signs of severe reality distortion. They needed clean air, medical attention, and immediate extraction from the nightmare Webb had created. Emily made her choice. She simultaneously activated the emergency communication system and triggered every alarm in the facility: fire suppression, medical alert, security breach, and hazardous material containment. The cacophony of alarms would mask her actions and create enough chaos to buy time. What the hell is happening? Webb's voice was sharp with panic. Multiple system failures, Emily replied, frantically working at her console. Fire suppression in sub-basement 3, medical emergency in the main chamber, security breach on level 2. Those are all false alarms. Override them. I'm trying. But the system's not responding. It might be a cascade failure in the main computer. Emily watched her screens as the emergency message propagated through law enforcement networks. FBI, state police, county sheriff, even federal marshals, anyone who could respond to reports of kidnapping and human experimentation. In the main chamber, the subjects were beginning to react to the clean air Emily had been gradually introducing. Michael's hallucinations were becoming less severe, and Jennifer's eyes were starting to focus. They were still damaged, still traumatized, but they were beginning to think clearly for the first time in days. Dr. Reeves, Webb's voice was ice-cold with suspicion. Report to my office immediately. Emily looked at the monitors one last time. Help was coming. She could see the timestamp showing her emergency message had been received and prioritized. But she needed to keep Webb distracted for at least another 20 minutes. On my way, Emily replied, but instead of heading to Webb's office, she went to the main chamber's entrance. It was time to get the subjects out personally, while Webb was focused on the system failures. The chamber door was magnetically locked. But Emily had administrative access. As the door hissed open, the subjects looked up in confusion and fear. They'd been conditioned to see any intrusion as a threat. My name is Dr. Emily Reeves, she said quickly. I've been watching you, and I'm here to get you out. Jennifer's voice was a raspy whisper. Is this real? Yes. Help is coming. Federal agents, police, medical teams. But we need to move now. Michael struggled to his feet, still disoriented but alert enough to understand. Where's David? Where did they take him? Sub-basement 3. I'm going to get him too, but first I need to get you to safety. Emily heard footsteps in the corridor. Security was coming. Webb had realized what was happening. This way, Emily said, leading the subjects toward an emergency exit she'd identified during her planning. Stay together, and whatever happens, don't let them separate you again. As they reached the stairwell, Emily heard Webb's voice echoing through the facility's intercom: security alert. Dr. Emily Reeves has suffered a psychological breakdown and is attempting to interfere with ongoing research. She's armed and dangerous. Use any means necessary to restrain her. Emily looked back at the subjects following her, 11 broken people who still had enough trust left to follow a stranger toward an uncertain freedom. She thought about Sarah, drugged and restrained somewhere below. She thought about David, fighting to maintain his sanity in solitary confinement. She thought about all the other researchers who might have asked questions. The first shot shattered the emergency light above Emily's head, sending sparks cascading down like deadly rain. She threw herself backward, shielding the subjects as glass fragments peppered the hallway. Federal agents, a voice boomed from the main entrance. This is the FBI. Building is surrounded. The security guards hesitated, their weapons trained on Emily and the huddled subjects. Through the chaos of alarms and shouting, Emily heard Webb's voice crackling through their radio. Earpieces, eliminate all witnesses. No survivors. That's a direct order. But the lead guard, a man Emily recognized as former military, lowered his weapon slightly. Sir, those are federal agents outside. If we fire on civilians, you're not firing on civilians, Webb's voice was ice cold. You're containing a security breach. Those subjects have been exposed to classified psychological warfare techniques. They can never be allowed to testify. Emily saw the moment the guard's resolve hardened. Loyalty to his paycheck warred with basic human decency, and the paycheck was winning. She had seconds before the shooting started again. Wait! Emily shouted, pulling the evidence drive from her pocket. I've already uploaded everything. Video, audio, medical records, it's all been sent to the FBI, the media, Congress. Killing us won't stop the story. The guard's radio crackled, she's lying. Neutralize the threat. But another voice cut through the static, Agent Sarah Martinez of the FBI, her voice amplified by a bullhorn from outside. This is a federal crime scene. Any facility personnel who harm civilians will face charges of murder in the first degree. Stand down immediately. Emily felt a surge of hope. The cavalry had arrived, but they were still outside while she and the subjects were trapped in a hallway with armed men who had orders to kill. Jennifer, Emily whispered to the young woman cowering behind her. The stairwell behind us leads to the roof. Can you get the others up there? Jennifer's eyes were clearer now, the hallucinogens finally purged from her system. What about you? I'm going to get David and Sarah. They are still trapped downstairs. Dr. Reeves, Michael spoke up, his voice shaky but determined. We are not leaving you. Emily felt her heart break and soar at the same time. These people, tortured and traumatized by Webb's experiments, were still capable of loyalty and courage. You have to, Emily said firmly. The FBI needs to hear your testimony. You're the only proof of what happened here. The security guards were advancing, and Emily knew she was out of time. She pressed the evidence drive into Jennifer's hands. If something happens to me, give this to the FBI. Everything is on there, every crime, every victim, every order Webb gave. Nothing's going to happen to you, Jennifer said fiercely. We are all getting out of here. The stairwell door burst open behind them, and more security poured in. Emily realized they were surrounded. Trapped between two armed groups with orders to kill. That's when the building shook. A massive explosion from somewhere below sent vibrations through the entire structure. Emergency lighting flickered, and the constant hum of ventilation systems stuttered to a halt. What the hell was that? The lead guard shouted into his radio. Webb's voice, strained and panicked, Sub-Basement 3 has been breached. Subject 1 has escaped containment. Emily felt a savage grin cross her face. David had broken free. The soldier Webb had tried so hard to break was fighting back. Another explosion, closer this time. Through the facility's intercom, they could hear gunfire and shouting from the lower levels. David wasn't just escaping, he was systematically destroying Webb's operation from the inside. The guards' attention was split now, some watching Emily and the subjects, others trying to coordinate with teams responding to David's rampage below. Emily saw her chance. Run, she shouted, grabbing Jennifer's hand and pulling the group toward the main entrance. The FBI is right outside. They made it 20 feet before the shooting started in earnest. Emily felt a bullet tear through her shoulder, spinning her around and slamming her into the wall. But the subjects kept moving, their survival instincts finally overcoming 3 days of psychological conditioning. Dr. Reeves. Michael doubled back, grabbing her uninjured arm. Come on. Go, Emily gasped, blood streaming down her arm. I'm right behind you. Through the glass doors, Emily could see FBI agents in tactical gear surrounding the building. Agent Martinez was coordinating teams to breach multiple entrances simultaneously. Help was so close, but the guards were closing in. That's when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in red light, but those few seconds of darkness were enough. Emily heard the distinctive sound of military-trained movement, fast, silent, lethal. David Martinez emerged from the stairwell like a ghost, moving with the fluid precision of a special forces operator. 3 days of psychological torture had stripped away his civilian facade, revealing the trained killer underneath. The first guard went down without a sound, his neck snapped with surgical efficiency. The second managed to turn before David's fist connected with his temple, dropping him instantly. The third guard got his weapon halfway up before David disarmed him and used his own gun to put him down. "Emily," David said, his voice perfectly calm despite the chaos. "Are you hit?" "Shoulder," Emily replied, pressing her hand against the wound. "David, how did you?" "They made a mistake," David said, helping her to her feet. "They thought isolation would break me. Instead, it gave me time to plan." The building shook again as another explosion echoed from below. David had done more than escape, he'd turned Webb's own facility into a war zone. "Sarah?" Emily asked. "Safe. Drugged, but alive. She's with the FBI team that breached Sub-Basement 3. Through the glass doors, Emily could see the subjects being helped by federal agents, finally free of their nightmare. Jennifer was talking rapidly to Agent Martinez, the evidence drive clutched in her hands. "What?" Emily asked. David's expression darkened. "Still in his office. He's got a dead man's switch connected to explosive charges throughout the building. Says if he can't complete his research, he'll destroy all the evidence." Emily's blood ran cold. "There are still people in this building. Staff, researchers, maybe other subjects we don't know about." "I know," David said grimly. "That's why we're going to stop him." They moved through the corridors, passing signs of David's systematic assault on the facility's security. Every guard post was neutralized, every surveillance station destroyed. He'd fought his way through 3 levels of armed resistance to reach them. "How many?" Emily asked as they climbed toward Webb's office. 23 security personnel total. Most of them are just doing their jobs, they don't know about the illegal experiments. I use non-lethal force when possible. And when it wasn't possible. David's silence was answer enough. They reached the executive level to find Webb's office door barricaded from the inside. Through the reinforced glass, Emily could see him hunched over a computer terminal, frantically deleting files. "Dr. Webb," Emily called out. "It's over. The FBI has everything. The subjects are safe. Just surrender." Webb looked up, his face twisted with rage and desperation. "You've destroyed everything. Years of research. Breakthrough data on psychological manipulation. We've stopped a war crime," David said simply. "War crime?" Webb laughed bitterly. "This research would have saved American lives. Understanding psychological breaking points, developing resistance techniques, by torturing innocent people," Emily interrupted. "By lying to volunteers who trusted you." Webb's hand moved toward a red button on his desk, the dead man's switch. "If I can't have the data, no one can. This building will be evidence of a tragic accident. A gas leak. An explosion." David stuttered the barricaded door, then looked at Emily. "Can you access the building's environmental systems from here?" Emily nodded, understanding immediately. She pulled out her tablet and connected to the facility's network. "What do you need?" "Flood his office with nitrogen. Knock him unconscious before he can trigger the charges." Emily's fingers flew across the screen, but Webb's security protocols were blocking her access. "I can't get through his firewalls." Webb heard them talking and pressed a button on his desk. Gas began hissing from vents in the corridor, not nitrogen, but something that made Emily's eyes water and her throat burn. "Tear gas," David said, pulling Emily away from the door. "He's buying time to finish destroying the evidence." That's when Agent Martinez's voice echoed through the building's PA system. "Dr. Marcus Webb, this is the FBI. You're surrounded and we have warrants for your arrest on charges of kidnapping, torture, and conspiracy. Surrender immediately or we will breach your location." Webb's voice came through the intercom, desperate and unhinged. "You don't understand. This research is vital to national security. I'm acting under federal authority. Dr. Webb, Agent Martinez replied, we've reviewed your contracts. Your authorization was revoked 6 months ago when the Department of Defense discovered the illegal nature of your experiments. You've been operating without oversight, conducting unauthorized research on unwilling subjects. Emily felt the world tilt. 6 months ago. He's been torturing people without any government backing. David's expression was grim. Which means this was never about national security. This was about Webb's personal obsession with